Hello, everyone. I hope you will support the discussion in the comments and tell me what you would do if you found yourself in the situations I am going to talk about today. I'm a 38-year-old carpenter, and that barn had become a sort of weekend project. It wasn't fancy, but it housed tools, supplies, and some old furniture I'd been fixing up. The whole setup was rustic, practical, and peaceful. That is, until my local association decided it wasn't. The first sign of trouble came through a letter slipped into my mailbox. It was from the association, claiming my barn was an unauthorized structure that breached some obscure clause in their rulebook. Funny thing was, I'd lived here for nearly a decade, and this barn had been here way before I was. When I moved in, it was practically falling apart. I'd put my heart into fixing it up and keeping it in good shape, even if it was a bit scruffy looking. But they insisted that I was violating community aesthetics and demanded it be taken down. I called the association to clarify, hoping it was just a mistake. My calls were ignored for days until I finally reached their new president, an ambitious man named Glenn, who sounded no older than 30 and seemed to have an unusual amount of power for someone in his position. Glenn told me, in a voice oozing arrogance, that they were doing me a favor by not finding me already. "Look, that structure's against the rules," he said, clearly enjoying his authority. "It's gotta go." I asked him what rule he was referring to, as I had done my research on the association's regulations when I moved in. He rattled off something about neighborhood harmony and how the barn's aesthetic didn't align with the community's standards. It was vague and suspicious, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Glenn was making it personal. I tried reasoning, even offered to give the barn a new coat of paint. But no, Glenn wasn't having any of it. According to him, the barn had to be removed within 30 days or they'd take action. I told him flat out that it wasn't happening. 2 weeks later, I returned from a weekend away to find my barn completely gone. Not dismantled, not carefully taken apart, but demolished. Pieces of wood, splintered beams, and broken furniture were scattered across my property. And amidst the rubble, there was a shiny new Notice of Compliance sign with the association's logo on it, declaring that I was in line with community standards. I was fuming. They hadn't even contacted me, hadn't given any warning. Glenn's smug grin was the only thing I could think of as I surveyed the mess. Then came the twist that almost sent me over the edge. Glenn sent me a letter claiming that, after reviewing property lines, they had determined that my barn had actually been on their land, a piece of property they claimed was theirs due to a technical boundary issue. They wanted to charge me for encroachment. In other words, they were saying I'd put my barn on association property and would need to pay for its removal. The sheer nerve was staggering. I knew this was a power play from Glenn, likely a way to make a name for himself by enforcing the rules to the letter. But I wasn't going to stand for it. I hired a surveyor to review the property lines, and as expected, the barn had always been well within my property. With this in hand, I filed a lawsuit against the association demanding $255,000 for the unauthorized destruction of my property, emotional distress, and legal fees. Glenn and the board tried to brush it off as a miscommunication, suggesting a small settlement to sweep it under the rug. But I was determined to go the whole 9 yards. The court date arrived, and my lawyer laid out every detail. We had photos of the barn, records showing I'd maintained it for years, and statements from neighbors who confirmed it had been there for decades. The survey results made it abundantly clear that the association's claims were bogus. When Glenn took the stand, his arrogance melted away. He stumbled through his testimony, admitting that they hadn't actually verified the property lines before tearing down the barn. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Glenn and the association were ordered to pay every cent I'd sued for, plus additional damages for the brazen attempt to charge me for their mess. They even faced a formal reprimand for their handling of the situation. Glenn's reputation in the neighborhood was ruined. Soon after, he resigned, slinking away in disgrace, and the association was forced to revise its policies on property disputes. The settlement allowed me to rebuild my barn and cover any costs the association had tried to force on me. And while I wasn't one for gloating, I did feel a sense of justice as I put the finishing touches on my new barn, sturdier and better than ever, right where it belonged. Before the next story, I would like to ask you to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Let's move on to the next story. My uncle's journey to becoming a doctor in Australia started with a sense of hope and ambition that only a few could maintain after all he endured. As a highly respected doctor in his home country, he had built a reputation for his expertise and compassion. Yet, in the 1990s, Australia faced a significant shortage of medical professionals, leading the government to offer pathways for experienced foreign doctors to come and contribute to the healthcare system. It seemed like an incredible opportunity for our family, one that came with the promise of citizenship and a better future. When my uncle first arrived, he was welcomed with the same warmth many immigrants feel: a handshake, a few polite smiles, and an invitation to make a home in this land. But there was a catch, a hidden hurdle that became all too clear once he tried to resume his career. Despite his years of experience, He had to pass 3 costly and demanding exams to practice as a licensed doctor in Australia. These exams weren't just a minor step, but an overwhelming financial and emotional burden. Each exam cost thousands of dollars, and they were only offered twice a year with limited seats. To make matters worse, the exams had an unpredictable pass-fail system, making it nearly impossible to know what was required to succeed. For many foreign doctors, these obstacles led to tough decisions. Some ended up driving taxis, running small businesses, or taking on odd jobs just to get by, leaving their medical careers behind. But my uncle wasn't ready to give up that easily. He had invested too much into his career to let a few exams stop him. Instead, he made an unusual choice. He would reapply to medical school in Australia and go through the entire process again, this time from scratch. The decision wasn't easy, especially for a man who was already nearing 40 and had a family depending on him. But for my uncle, it was worth every sacrifice. With more than a decade of medical experience behind him, he breezed through his studies, quickly standing out among his classmates. His professors took notice of his knowledge and dedication, with many encouraging him to pursue a surgical residency. However, balancing family and career was important to him, and he decided that becoming a general practitioner, a family doctor, would allow him to fulfill his dream without compromising his time with his loved ones. At the time, GP residencies were highly competitive, especially for foreign-trained doctors. There was an unofficial hierarchy in the medical community, and doctors from overseas often found themselves at the bottom. Many residency programs took advantage of this dynamic, knowing that these doctors were desperate to complete their training and begin working. As a result, foreign doctors were frequently overworked and undervalued. They were assigned the most challenging shifts, often on weekends or holidays, with little consideration for their personal lives. Study time, vacation leave, and even allowances that were supposed to help ease their financial burdens were regularly withheld, forcing them to struggle even more. My uncle witnessed this firsthand when he started his training. He chose a medical practice located within a predominantly Indian community, hoping it would offer a supportive environment for him and his family, especially with the availability of familiar food, schools, and a community that shared his culture. But as soon as he began, it became clear that this practice was no different from the others exploiting foreign doctors. He was given all the Saturday shifts, robbing him of weekends with his family. Study time was a formality rather than an actual allowance, with his supervisors expecting him to come in even during those designated hours. Worst of all, there was a pervasive sense of discrimination that hung over the clinic. The practice was owned by a senior doctor, an older GP who showed blatant disdain toward Indian, Asian, and Aboriginal patients. This doctor's biases created a tense atmosphere, not only for the patients who visited, but also for my uncle and other foreign doctors who worked there. Despite these obstacles, my uncle's resilience didn't waver. He endured every indignity, quietly biding his time while focusing on completing his training. He knew that each shift brought him closer to his goal of becoming a licensed GP, and he was determined to prove that he could rise above the challenges set before him. Even when personal hardships struck, the practice showed little empathy. One time, when my aunt fell seriously ill and had to be hospitalized, my uncle requested time off to care for her and their children, but his request was denied, forcing him to juggle his demanding work schedule with the responsibilities of caring for his sick wife and their young kids. This was a breaking point for him, revealing the extent to which he was being mistreated. Still, he kept his head down and continued working, knowing that his opportunity to turn the tables would eventually come. Finally, after 3 grueling years of dealing with relentless hours, unreasonable demands, and a steady stream of racism, my uncle reached the end of his residency. The moment he received his official certification as a GP, he quit that job without a second thought. He had fulfilled his commitment, met every requirement, and now he was ready to take control of his own destiny. After leaving the clinic, my uncle's determination to build something of his own became the driving force in his life. He walked into a local bank with a business proposal and a vision. He explained to the loan officer his plan to open a GP practice, one that would cater to the diverse community around him, provide quality healthcare, and offer a supportive environment for both patients and staff. His earnestness and experience helped him secure a loan, and with that initial financial support, he set out to create a clinic that would embody everything he believed in. Starting a medical practice from scratch was a massive undertaking, especially as a foreign doctor without deep financial reserves. The first few months were difficult. He barely broke even. Patients were slow to arrive, skeptical of a new doctor in town, and he had to invest more time in marketing than he'd anticipated. He spent long hours at the clinic, sometimes working late into the night, juggling administrative tasks with patient care, and often taking on extra duties to keep things running. It was an uphill battle, and there were days when he wondered if he'd made the right decision. But word slowly began to spread. Patients who had been under his care at the old practice sought him out, leaving the former clinic to find my uncle at his new location. They valued his warmth, his attention to detail, and his respect for their individual needs. With every new patient who walked through his doors, my uncle gained more confidence in his decision to go independent. The community, too, began to notice that here was a doctor who truly cared, one who wasn't pushing unnecessary treatments or overcharging for services. He was a breath of fresh air for patients who had grown accustomed to the indifferent, transactional nature of many clinics. As his patient base grew, so did his need for more staff. At first, he could only afford a small team, a receptionist, and a part-time nurse who helped with basic patient care. But soon, he needed more hands. He brought on another doctor, also foreign-trained, who shared his vision of creating a patient-centered clinic. Together, they worked tirelessly, often covering each other's shifts, making sure patients received the best care possible. The bond they formed was built on mutual respect and a shared understanding of what it was like to face the challenges of being an outsider in the medical field. The clinic's success wasn't just due to the quality of care they provided. It was also rooted in my uncle's efforts to make the practice a place where both doctors and patients felt respected. Unlike his previous experience where foreign doctors were treated poorly, my uncle ensured that his team received fair compensation, reasonable working hours, and time off when they needed it. He made sure his staff had the study time and resources they required to keep up with continuing education, knowing firsthand how essential these were for growth and mental well-being. Slowly but surely, his practice began to stand out. Patients appreciated the care they received, and word of mouth brought in a steady stream of new clients. People valued a clinic that treated them as individuals rather than numbers, and this reputation helped my uncle's practice gain traction in the area. By the end of his first year, he was still working long hours, but the clinic was stable. For the first time since moving to Australia, he felt the pride of knowing he had built something lasting, something that could provide for his family and offer a future free from the instability he'd faced in his early days. The success of the clinic didn't go unnoticed by his former boss. The owner of the old practice was irritated by the loss of patients and the slow but steady competition building right around the corner. However, my uncle paid him no mind. He focused instead on nurturing his practice, hiring an additional nurse, and taking on 2 medical trainees who were eager to learn and work under him. These trainees were often foreign doctors themselves, individuals who had come to Australia with the same dreams my uncle once had, and he took it upon himself to give them the guidance and respect he had been denied. As his practice continued to grow, my uncle reached a point where he could open a second clinic. He found a location not too far from his first practice, creating a network of clinics that supported each other while serving a broad range of patients. This second clinic allowed him to offer more specialized services and attract a diverse patient base, including younger families and elderly patients in need of consistent, compassionate care. With the expansion, he hired more doctors and support staff, creating jobs and opportunities for others who might have been overlooked in the traditional system. This expansion brought with it new responsibilities, but my uncle thrived in the role of a mentor and leader. He made sure that his staff knew they were valued, frequently checking in to ensure their work-life balance was respected. He encouraged his doctors to take time for themselves and provided ample support for their professional development. His clinics became known as places where foreign-trained doctors could thrive, free from the exploitation they had experienced elsewhere. My uncle's dedication to fair treatment created a loyal team, and his staff turnover was remarkably low, a testament to the respectful, nurturing work environment he had cultivated. Within a few years, he had opened a third clinic, forming a triangle of practices that effectively surrounded his old boss's clinic. With each clinic my uncle opened, the competition for patients intensified. He invested in advertising, promoted his clinics at local events, and even partnered with community organizations to provide health services to underserved populations. His old boss struggled to keep up, as patients steadily chose my uncle's clinics over his. The effect was unmistakable. The once thriving practice of his former boss began to decline. My uncle's clinics were drawing more patients each day, creating a ripple effect that extended through the entire community. For years, his boss had been a fixture in the area, but now, he was struggling to keep his practice afloat. As the years passed, my uncle's clinics became more than just successful businesses. They became trusted pillars in the community. Patients came not only for medical advice, but also for the reassurance and respect they knew they'd find in his care. Each visit was met with genuine concern and kindness, a stark contrast to the clinical, rushed feel many had experienced elsewhere. Patients would bring in their family members, friends, and neighbors, recommending the clinic because they felt valued and safe. My uncle's commitment to fairness and respect continued to set him apart. He avoided the practices his former boss had insisted upon, overcharging patients, pushing unnecessary treatments, or rushing through consultations. Instead, he focused on creating a welcoming environment where both patients and staff were treated with dignity. He believed that good medical care was more than just prescriptions and diagnoses. It was about making patients feel heard and respected. With 3 clinics now forming a small network in the area, my uncle's business became an undeniable force. Patients, many of whom had been his old boss's clients, flocked to my uncle's practices for quality care. The reputation he had built over the years was spreading even further. He received thank you letters from patients and words of appreciation from families who felt they had finally found a doctor who cared. This word-of-mouth success proved more powerful than any formal advertising, drawing new faces to his clinics every week. Meanwhile, the impact on his former boss's clinic became painfully clear. Patients who once filled the old clinic's waiting rooms now sat in my uncle's, discussing how grateful they were to have a doctor who respected their time and treated them fairly. The decline of his former boss's practice was slow at first, but as months turned into years, the differences became stark. His former boss's clinic went from bustling with activity to eerily quiet, struggling to attract the same level of business it once had. My uncle's success wasn't simply about competition. It was about creating a better standard of care, one that wasn't tainted by biases or profit-driven motives. Each of his 3 clinics had developed a distinct, trusted reputation, and their combined influence was gradually overpowering the old clinic that had once treated my uncle so poorly. Eventually, my uncle's former boss realized the situation was dire. The clinic that had once been a dominant player in the area was now barely getting by, with far fewer patients and a dwindling staff. The other doctors who had once worked there had either left or retired, and the once busy clinic was now just a shadow of its former self. With only one doctor left, his former boss, financial strain was taking its toll, and the clinic's days were clearly numbered. Seeing the inevitable, the former boss tried to sell his practice. He approached other doctors in the area, hoping to find someone interested in buying the clinic and reviving its business. But the reputation damage was done, and no one was willing to take on the challenge of reviving a failing practice, especially with 3 well-established, successful clinics nearby that already had a dedicated patient base. Desperation led his former boss to consider an option he'd never imagined: selling the clinic to my uncle. He reached out, proposing a sale at a significantly reduced price, hoping to offload the business before things got worse. My uncle's response was polite but firm. He declined the offer. He had no interest in taking over the clinic, even at a bargain price. Instead, he continued to focus on running his own clinics, satisfied with the work he had built from the ground up. But he knew that the decline of his former boss's clinic was only a matter of time, and he was willing to wait. Eventually, as his former boss's financial troubles grew, the bank repossessed the property. My uncle saw an opportunity and made his move. He approached the bank and purchased the building, this time at an even lower price than what his former boss had initially offered. It was a fitting end to the years of struggle and hardship my uncle had faced, a quiet yet powerful victory that showed just how far he had come. But my uncle's plans for the building were anything but ordinary. After acquiring the property, he made a unique choice. Rather than turning it into another clinic, he decided to remodel the entire building to serve as his main office headquarters. This was where he would handle the operations of his 3 successful practices and plan for future ventures. The space that had once symbolized struggle and adversity for him was now a symbol of his triumph and hard work. In a final, subtle act of closure, he repurposed the room that had once belonged to his former boss. He transformed it into a staff restroom, a small but symbolic gesture to mark the end of an era and the beginning of something new. To him, it wasn't about revenge, but about putting the past behind him in a way that brought him peace. The community responded warmly to the transformation. They knew the story of his journey, the battles he had fought, and the obstacles he had overcome. His patients and staff celebrated his achievements, recognizing how his commitment to kindness and respect had ultimately led him to this point. My uncle's success wasn't built on taking down his competitors, but on building a place where people felt valued and respected, a legacy that went beyond financial gain. With his new headquarters, my uncle's clinics continued to grow, and he remained dedicated to his mission. He saw his role not just as a doctor, but as a mentor, welcoming foreign-trained doctors who, like him, were looking for a fair chance to practice medicine. He provided them with the resources and support they needed to succeed, knowing that each doctor he helped would carry forward the same commitment to compassion and respect. Over the years, he trained dozens of doctors, creating a network of medical professionals who shared his values. His clinics became a source of pride in the community, a place where everyone knew they could find quality care delivered with empathy and integrity. Patients, doctors, and staff all saw in him a leader who had stayed true to his principles, even when it would have been easier to give up. As the years passed, my uncle's story became almost legendary within our family and community. His journey from struggling foreign doctor to the owner of a thriving network of clinics was an inspiration, especially for those who knew how hard he had fought to build a life and career in a foreign country. His clinics weren't just medical facilities, they were symbols of resilience, fairness, and dedication to the people they served. One of the things that always set my uncle apart was his genuine passion for helping others succeed. He remembered how lonely and challenging it had been when he first arrived, facing an unfamiliar system that seemed stacked against him at every turn. Because of this, he made it a priority to support young doctors, particularly those who had come from overseas. He wanted to create an environment where they could flourish without the same hardships he had endured. Under his mentorship, these doctors learned not only medical skills but also values of empathy and integrity. My uncle emphasized that treating patients was about more than diagnoses and prescriptions. It was about making people feel respected and heard. These young doctors carried his principles into their own practices, creating a ripple effect that spread throughout the community. My uncle's reputation extended beyond his clinics as well. He frequently volunteered his time to participate in community health events, often offering free consultations and health screenings at local festivals, schools, and senior centers. People in the area grew to know and trust him, not only as a doctor, but as a friend who cared deeply about their well-being. He became a role model, showing that true success isn't just about financial achievement, but about the positive difference one can make in the lives of others. This dedication to his community didn't go unnoticed. Over time, he received awards and recognition for his contributions to local healthcare. But, true to his humble nature, he rarely displayed these honors. To him, the greatest reward was seeing the gratitude in his patients' faces and knowing that he had created a lasting impact. The community's appreciation meant more to him than any plaque or certificate, and he remained focused on his work, always striving to improve the care he provided. At home, his family, too, felt the effects of his success. My cousins and I grew up hearing stories of his perseverance and integrity, learning from his example about the value of hard work and kindness. He instilled in us the belief that treating people with respect and empathy was the foundation of any meaningful accomplishment. His journey wasn't just about building a business. It was about building character and setting a standard of excellence for future generations. In the end, my uncle chose not to expand further than his 3 clinics. Despite many opportunities to do so, he believed that maintaining a close-knit network allowed him to oversee the quality of care and the well-being of his staff, something he feared might be compromised with rapid expansion. For him, success was about balance, about having enough to live comfortably while remaining grounded in his values. He wanted to enjoy his life, spend time with his family, and continue to serve the community that had embraced him. Today, his clinics continue to thrive, and the impact of his work lives on in every patient he has helped, every doctor he has trained, and every member of the community who has come to respect him. The property that once represented his most challenging chapter is now a bustling headquarters, filled with the energy and commitment of those he has inspired. The former boss who had once belittled and exploited him is long gone, replaced by the vibrant legacy my uncle has built. And perhaps the most poetic part of it all is that my uncle never lost sight of who he was. He never let his hardships turn him bitter or make him lose faith in the kindness of others. Instead, he turned those challenges into opportunities to create something better, not just for himself, but for everyone around him. His journey is a testament to the power of resilience, kindness, and the belief that treating people with respect will ultimately lead to success. My uncle may have started as a stranger in a new land, facing unimaginable struggles, but today, he stands as a respected leader in his community, a man whose story reminds us that even the toughest battles can be overcome with patience, hard work, and a compassionate heart. His journey shows us all that no matter where we come from or what obstacles we face, we can rise above them and create a life that reflects our values and brings us true fulfillment. This legacy, built on integrity and empathy, is his greatest achievement. Thank you for watching.